Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our attendees joining us today for this latest Data Science Central webinar. This is Bill Voorhees, your host. I'm the editorial director with Data Science Central and also chief data scientist for Data Magnum. So I'd like to start off our event today by thanking Alteryx for sponsoring today's event. Alteryx is a longtime supporter of the Data Science Central community, and we're honored to have them sponsoring our event today. Now, past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com, and if you haven't had the opportunity to view them, I encourage you to take a look. They provide a very useful insight into a wide variety of topics that are of interest to our data science community. Now, today's webinar is entitled The Analytics Lifecycle Revolution, Evolution or Extinction, to be presented by Alteryx. But before we begin today, I'd like to briefly review the format for today's webinar. Today's webinar will be an hour long. We have three presenters who I'll introduce in just a minute. There'll be 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A following the presentation, and today's event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com later this afternoon following today's live event. Now, I'd also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation. We'll be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the Q&A portion of today's event. Well, I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers today. Dave Wells with the Eckerson Group, Levon Johnson with Alaska Air Group, and Lisa Aguilar with Alteryx. Now, Dave is practice lead data management at Eckerson Group and is an advisory consultant, educator, and research analyst dedicated to building meaningful connections along the path from data to business impact. He works at the intersection of information and business, driving value through analytics, business intelligence, and innovation. With nearly 5 decades of combined experience in information management and business management, Dave has a unique perspective about the connections of business, information, data, and technology. Now, Levon is manager of employee data and analytics at Alaska Air, and has worked in a variety of analytical roles in the airline industry, including revenue management, customer service recovery, alliances and revenue, and capacity planning. You know, a skilled Alteryx user, Levon is recognized as an expert in his organization for successfully implementing the platform to streamline internal processes and enable exciting projects that were previously impossible. Now, Lisa is a senior product marketing manager at Alteryx. Lisa's passionate about the analytics space and showing how innovative analytic technology can help analysts move past mundane data tasks, elevate their skills and expertise, and deliver ever increasingly sophisticated insights. So Dave, Levon, Lisa, thanks for being with us today. We're looking forward to your presentation. With so many digital initiatives competing for resources, breaking through legacy analytic slowness, and modernizing the analytics lifecycle is vital. The key is turning data assets into insight-driven actions as quickly and collaboratively as possible, and without reinventing the wheel. So learn all about compressing the analytic process, aligning data discovery with visualization, cataloging, preparation, blending, profiling, enrichment, and modeling into a seamless experience with industry expert Dave Wells. Now, Levon Johnson will further illustrate how he single-handedly elevated employee analytics from next to nothing gut-driven decisions to company-standard data-driven effectiveness. So in today's Data Science Central webinar, you'll find resolution to the analytic barriers of time, effort, and pain, deeper accuracy and efficiency through reuse and collaboration, and real examples of quick win projects and meaningful reports. Break down data barriers, keeping analytic teams from getting the insights that matter. It's a new age for how companies innovate with analytics, and it's time the analytics process caught up. So Lisa, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can begin as soon as you're ready to go.
Thank you very much, Bill. Can you guys hear me okay?
Just fine.
Great, thank you. So today we're going to be talking about that analytics lifecycle and revolutionizing it and why you need to do that. It really comes down to evolution or extinction. But before I begin, I wanted to introduce who Alteryx is. So for those of you who may not know about Alteryx, we are the leader in self-service data analytics. And we recently have won the Gartner Peer Insights Award for BI and Analytics, as well as been named a leader in Gartner Magic Quadrant for the data science space. We have also been awarded Amazon's competency for machine learning certification, as well as their big data competency for certification. In addition to that, we are one of the single platforms that can be found across multiple waves or magic quadrants. So we are known for our strength in terms of data preparation, spatial analytics, as well as our data science capabilities and functions. And last but not least, we have been named as Deloitte Technology's fastest 500 technology company in North America. So to go through a little bit about the agenda today, I want to level set and talk about rethinking your analytics lifecycle, why it's so critical to organizations, what it means to you within the analytics team, and why you're starting to feel all of this pressure and why it's impacting you so much. Next, I'm going to pass it on to Dave Wells of Eckerson Group, who's going to be spending a bit more time about looking at the existing analytics lifecycle and some of the steps that you can take and the lens in which you need to be looking at that lifecycle in order to modernize it. Finally, we're going to be passing this on to Levon James, who's going to be talking about Alaska Airlines and taking this strategy and this concept and applying it to a real-world setting and giving you guys some of his experience and tales from his analytic trenches that you can then take and look at and applying within your organization. Finally, we'll get to a Q&A, and we'll be then concluding our webinar. So to kick things off and to spend a little bit of time on what's going on in the world today and the temperature that's affecting analytics teams. First and foremost, it's an exciting time, and it's a really great time to be part of an analytics group within an organization. It's being seen as a critical component to organization, and it's moved from a thing to the thing in a lot of organizations today. So let's talk a little bit about why it's shifted that way. And I'm sure that many of you can attest on this call that you just can't work hard enough, fast enough, or even late enough to keep up with the demands and the pressures that you're being tasked with in terms of delivering insights. So I just want to let you guys know you're not alone. Analytic teams and leaders across the industry sectors are feeling this pressure. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that there is a creative destruction that is whipping through corporations today faster than ever before. And now that's either an exciting moment or it's a very intimidating moment, depending on what side of the spectrum your organization is sitting on. And this is really impacting how your board of directors, how your executives are thinking about their future of their organizations today. Now, what's igniting this creative destruction within the industries is the digital transformation. And what does creative destruction actually mean? So if you look at the lifespan of organizations today, which is what you're seeing on this graph, and you go back to even further than when this graph is depicting here, and you looked at a company that started in the 1920s, that company nearly had 70 years before another company came in and disrupted its hold on the market. And no real innovation was required on their part. Now, if we bring that timeline in a little bit closer to what you're seeing here, and you look at companies that started around the mid-60s, companies still had a very good run rate. The half-life of a company was about 33 years before they had market disruption. Now, if you fast forward to today, companies have about 15 years before they're disrupted in their industry by either evolutionary change and how that industry is shaping or looking, or with new competitors entering in. It is an extremely short lifespan. And that creative destruction is burning so fast that it's predicted that 40% of today's Fortune 500 companies that are trading on the S&P 500 are no longer going to exist in 10 years. So think about that. Those stories of Kodak not being able to keep up with the new iPhone changes, those stories are going to start happening faster. The organizations that you know today may no longer be there tomorrow, or they're definitely not going to exist if they're ahead of that analytics curve and that digital transformation curve. They're not going to exist in the way that you know them today. Now, it's expected that by 2027, 75% of the organizations on today's S&P 500 are going to be replaced. This is a tremendous amount of pressure that is facing your executive teams, your board members, and this pressure is being trickled down and passed on to the analytics team. Because in order to stay ahead of that digital innovation, and the analytics arm race is on. It's the reason why you as an analyst and your analytic teams are facing such tremendous amount of pressure to drive new insights and new information, because analytics is the centerpiece of a digital business transformation. This isn't about gut feeling anymore. It's really about driving business valuing change. And those pressures of moving beyond descriptive insights into more those predictive, prescriptive, and even AI and machine learning driving value within your organization are only going to increase because this lifespan of the organization in which you're supporting today is shrinking exponentially. So we can talk about analytics and what it means to an organization and this pressure that you guys are facing, but with all of the advancements that we have made, there are still some key and core fundamental challenges that organizations face today in order to achieve that digital transformation that they're demanding of analytics teams. And Bill, let me see here. Perfect. I just want to make sure my slide was building. So one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing and that organizations are facing, it's not about having more data. Everybody's drowning in the sea of data. So more data isn't really the answer in order to get to those higher value analytics. It's the wrong lens to look at this. It's really about taking that analytics and those techniques and applying it to any of the data that you have. It's a simple and sinister problem that organizations are dealing with. In fact, we worked with Harvard Business Review and we did a study, and data analysts and analytic leaders and managers, they were asked how many data sources they use in their organization to make one decision. And though it's clear there's been a fundamental shift that it was a few years ago, we're using more and more data sources to create one insight. And now IT used to blend that data and push it into a data warehouse. And despite all of their excellent work, IT groups in making a centralized data management system, analysts and analytic teams are still faced with the task of creating the specific analytic data set that they need. Now, 6% of organizations have all their data in one place. It's a very small percentage of organizations. The majority of analytic teams have to pull from 5 or more different data sources, spreadsheets, cloud applications, social media, data warehouse, web scraping, etc., in order to aggregate that information and create one unique view. Now, most of what organizations, they understand is that is an issue. But the other big issue that is causing a lot of data delays and causing a lot of delays in terms of insights is the fact that data professionals are spending most of their time governing and searching for data than they are actually extracting the value. And this is, as usual, a couple of big problems. One is data sprawl. It's tremendously difficult within any organization to get it, find it, figure out if that's the right data source, and then actually use it. This is unlike those internet applications. Data assets are really diverse. They're really hard to share, they're really hard to find, and they're really hard to leverage. This is compounded also by the shortage of analytic talent that's out there. Everybody knows this. It's about those data scientists. There are just not enough of them in the world. So specialized analytics teams can't scale. So no matter how talented your data scientists are, there just simply aren't enough of them to support the number of requests that are coming to the analysts across the business, particularly when it comes to that lens of that digital transformation. So how do you look at your existing analytic talent and either reskill your existing data scientists to make them much more efficient and effective and driving that ROI business value to the organization? And how do you upskill your existing analytic talent who has the business knowledge, who has the wherewithal, but may not have the right tools or processes in place to take on higher value analytic tasks? And then the last big challenge that a lot of organizations are facing in terms of driving that analytic-driven digital transformation is the fact that taking these insights and these models and deploying them and embedding them into your business process, into these autonomous, custom-built business process internally within your organization, or those that face externally to your consumers, and driving that value that your high analytic talent is spending lots of time creating, and the lack of the ability for them to actually deploy those models into production is huge. And these are the big challenges that organizations need to look at. They're not new, they're not sexy, but these are the things that are real and that need to be plagued. So if you as an analyst or you as an analytic leader are looking to embed that higher value analytic task, and you're trying to reach for that AI and ML and bring that into your analytic team at scale, these are the core fundamental problems that need to be addressed and looked at before you can actually even get there. That's your end goal, and you need to be able to reach those milestones and create that infrastructure and that life cycle in order to hit there. And that leads me to my next point here, and this is why I want to pass this on to Dave Wells, who's going to be talking about modernizing that analytic life cycle and creating that agile data pipeline in order to achieve those higher level goals.
Thank you, Lisa. Pretty powerful statements there about the amount of data we have, the number of data sources that we have to use to get answers to a single question, and the amount of time wasted in doing all of this. As you were speaking, it reminded me of a recent conference where in the course of one presentation, I ran a live poll. And the question in the poll was, how many data warehouses do you have? Looking back to the days when we believed in the early 90s that by integrating data into a data warehouse, a single source of truth, we would resolve some of these complex data issues. Well, we all know single version of the truth hasn't worked out. What happened in the live poll was that I had 20-some%, I think 22% of people who responded to this poll said they had 5 or more data warehouses. Less than 2% responded that they have only 1 data warehouse. So when we take multiple data warehouses plus all of the other data sources that we have today in this age of big data, it gets very, very complex. So our challenges in analytics come in many, many forms. We start with this idea that if we take data, we process it analytically, we gain insight, that drives action. And much of what's been discussed in analytics and data science is the opportunities to gain insight. And I come down very strongly on the side of insight's not the end game. Insight is only the beginning. And ultimately what we want insight to do is drive impact and innovation. And I think innovation is a key thing here that comes into play that responds to what Lisa discussed about the life cycle of organizations and the half-life of organizations and the digital disruption. It's only by innovating that we're able to sustain a company, sustain a business, and avoid impacts such as what I refer to as the Uber effect, what Uber has done to taxi companies. Every business is at risk of being disrupted and displaced by innovators, so we have to become our own disruptors and innovators. So we need to rethink this analytic life cycle and overcome some of the challenges with it. As Lisa discussed, finding data is the first challenge. There's lots and lots of data out there, and finding the right data set, the best data set, is important. Once we find it, we have to understand what's in it, evaluate it, determine if it's right for the use case. And getting past those two hurdles, then it's necessary to prepare the data, to blend data from multiple data sets, to derive data, to filter data, to select the right set of variables for analysis, to format to fit the analytic tool, and so on. So there's a lot of work that goes on there. Then we get to the challenge of trusting the data. You perform the analysis, you deliver the results, and somebody questions, how was this analysis performed? Where did you get the data? Can you show me data lineage? So on and so forth. So trust has become a big issue as we work with data. So all of these things that precede finding the insights, finding the data, understanding the data, preparing the data, and trusting the data, they consume more of the data analyst's time than the actual analysis itself. It's too much time. It's too much work. The results are inconsistent. And the net effect is that we get a lot of uncertainty in a world where analytics should reduce uncertainty and improve confidence in business decision making. The problem we have is, I call it analytics gridlock, and it's we have data analysts, business analysts, data scientists, all out there working blind. And what I mean by working blind is that they can't find the data that they need. They're constantly data seeking. They're asking colleagues. They're relying on tribal knowledge. They use what little documentation is available. They often fall back on data sets that they've used previously because it's fast. It may not be a perfect fit for the particular analytics problem, but it's fast. They know where the data is. It's available and easy to work with. So we have a lot of data analysis today that's done on less than optimum data sets, simply to get past this gridlock of finding the data. What I hear anecdotally is about 80% of time spent data seeking and data preparation and only 20% in data analysis. The other reality that goes on here is we have a lot of waste and redundancy. We have different analysts, different scientists preparing the same data over and over and over again in very similar ways because they're not aware, each is not aware of what the others are doing. The net effect is we get inefficient analysis, we get imperfect analysis, sometimes we get incorrect analysis, and the effect of incorrect analysis can be bad business decisions and bad business outcomes. So we have to change this analytic life cycle. What we traditionally have done looks a lot like this diagram. We start with requirement specification and we work in a linear fashion through data seeking, evaluation, access, acquisition, profiling, understanding, etc., all the way down until we have models we can present, we can communicate, we can implement. It's a long model, it's a complex model, it's a very linear model, and when I look at it, I have to ask the question, do we really need a 12-step program for analytics? So we need to try to compress this life cycle, make it more efficient, make it better match the reality of what analytics is. And so I've reduced in this diagram the 12 steps to 7, but that's maybe the least significant part of the difference between these two images that now sit side by side. If you look at the image on the left, a lot of what goes on here is themes, requirement specification, data seeking, data evaluation, access authorization. These feel all sort of passive and like results, phases, milestones. On the right, we have actions, frame the problem, find the data, evaluate the data, profile the data. So we need a life cycle that is more active and less passive, as well as a life cycle that is compressed. And you can see where we begin to combine things, put them together into single steps instead of multiple and complex steps. So if I look at framing the problem, that's a counterpart to requirement specification. The reality is we can't readily define analytic requirements. They're elusive, they're evolving, they're a product of discovery. So we can't take traditional requirements gathering approaches and use them for analytics. It just proves not to be effective. Instead, we need to frame the problem for which we are seeking some understanding and some insights. And If the problem is well framed, then the requirements discovery becomes a natural part of the analysis activities. After framing the problem, we want to combine the data seeking, evaluation, access, and acquisition, and put that together as a single step of find, evaluate, and acquire data. And the reason we want to put this together is because from the perspective of the individual doing the work, it's not linear step by step. It's, I look at data, I access it, I evaluate it, I determine that it is or is not a fit for my use case, I acquire the data. That's all done as one activity, not as a sequence of distinct steps. And it is iterative in that I find a data set, I need to evaluate it. Sometimes I need to go back and find another data set. I evaluate multiple data sets. I get recommendations for data sets that work with other data sets and so on. So this needs to be compressed as a single activity that takes in all of those activities, all of the work of finding data, evaluating data, and acquiring data. Once I find data, I need to profile and understand the data. And when I profile and understand the data, there are two kinds of data profiling. One is the statistical profiling that the profiling tools from relational database management systems work very well with, and they give me minimum, maximum, median values, distribution of values, percent null, percent unique, those sorts of things. That's all valuable in understanding data, but we also need to profile the data visually. We need to be able to see the shape of the data and the patterns that are inherent in it and outliers and exceptions and so on and so forth. So visual profiling as well as statistical profiling are important to this process. Then we move on to data preparation, improving data, enriching data, blending data, formatting data, getting it ready for analysis is a lot of work. And it involves everything from selecting the right variables to combining data from different data sets that perhaps don't even share a common key. So there's a lot of work that goes on in this, and in this world today where we have everyone from highly technical data scientists to self-service data analysts in business units, we need data preparation capabilities that I like to describe as code-free but code-friendly. Let me do most of the common data preparation functions, point and click, drag and drop, see the data change as I do the things that I do, and collect the metadata for data lineage, but do it without writing a line of code. Yet for the data scientists and the more technical people, give them the opportunity to do more complex functions by coding if they so desire. The next step then is the data analysis. It's about exploration, experimentation, modeling, understanding what we find. And this is reduced from 2 steps in the old life cycle to a single activity in the new life cycle, because it is nonlinear, it's interactive, it's highly visual, it's a people process. And there's a lot of science in data science, there's a lot of art in data analysis, and in particular in data visualization. So we need to treat this as a single cohesive activity that does a good job of supporting everyone from the highly technical data scientist to the line of business self-service analyst in a way that lets them interact with the data and discover the insights as they work with data. The next step is to share the insights, and presentation and communication isn't enough. We need to add the skill of data storytelling, bring the data and the analysis to life. We need to add narrative to visuals and put the two together. Describe what you found, describe why it happens, suggestions for how to make a difference. So presenting, communicating, telling data stories adding the narrative, engaging the audience. Data storytelling is really important for one simple reason. Statistics are momentary, stories endure. So when you tell a story, it engages the individual and the stories get retold. So part of engaging an entire business in pursuing analytics and making decisions based on analytics and making changes based on analytics, a lot of that is a cultural shift that begins with data storytelling. Finally, I don't want to implement as in put something into production. I want to do more than that. I want to operationalize for those analytic models that have an enduring life. We don't just want to make them production processes to run. We want to weave them into the fabric of day-to-day business operations such that analytics becomes a part of our business culture. And ultimately, that leads us to an environment where we can use data and analytics to make decisions, to take actions, and most importantly, as I described earlier, to drive innovation. I believe strongly that the businesses that thrive in the next decade will be those that master innovation, and the businesses that struggle will be those that don't get on top of innovation. Analytics is the fuel to drive innovation. Analytics delivers insight. Insight should generate ideas, spark the imagination, inspire people, and those things, insight, ideas, imagination, and inspiration, those are the fuel of innovation. So when we rethink this analytics life cycle, we can reduce it to 7 activities instead of 12 steps. And it's not just the number that matters here, it's the mental shift from steps to activities. It's organized to flow in the way that people work. Don't separate into discrete steps things that people do simultaneously and iteratively. It's built to foster collaboration, sharing. Ideally, it will increase reuse, which improves consistency. We will stop doing the redundant work that is wasteful. We'll accelerate the time to insight. And most importantly, I think we will increase our capacity for data analysis, because the time we stop spending on those data seeking and data preparation activities, when we spend that time instead on data analysis, we increase the capacity for gaining insights tremendously. So this then is what I see as the modern analytics life cycle. It is these 7 activities. Note the forward and backward flowing arrows. They are all iterative. We need to support them with smart tools and technology. We can't do this without data catalogs, data preparation tools, and data analysis tools that are compatible with this life cycle. We should be able to do all of this in a way that is business-friendly, code-free, visual, intuitive, and non-technical. And what we really want is a fast path from data to value and a fast path from insight to innovation. With that as my concepts on modern analytics life cycle, I want to hand off now to Levon, who will show us some real-life stories of how this has been done.
Thank you very much, Dave. So again, my name is Levon Johnson. I work at Alaska Airlines, and I want to share a little bit more of some specific lessons learned and some specific examples that illustrate a lot of what Dave has just been talking about. Just to give a little background about kind of why you may be interested in learning these lessons from me particularly. In addition to a pretty extensive background in analytics, I was actually tasked 2 years ago with creating a HR analytics function within our HR group from nothing. So a lot of these lessons are very relevant to me and are ones that I've gone through in the last couple of years as I've gone from absolutely no analytics in this department to building out a team and providing some real actionable results. So we'll get right into that. So first off, I put Dave's kind of framework of those 7 steps of the analytics life cycle into a slightly different format here. It's the same series of questions, the framing the question, the evaluating, knowing your data, all the way through to telling the story and creating action. And so we're going to follow that, and I'm going to highlight each one of those steps. And Dave did a great job explaining kind of what each of those steps are, and so I'm going to focus more on specific examples that I have seen over the last couple of years in my organization for each one of those steps, some of the pitfalls that we fell into, and some of the lessons that we learned. So we'll do that here specifically for each one of those, again, with respect to the people team here at Alaska Airlines. So our first is the framing of the question. And so I wanted to throw some examples of real requests that I've received. Some of these are still, recent requests that I've been given. Things such as, could you please send me a count of total Horizon employees broken down by pilots, flight attendants, et cetera. And that is verbatim what was sent to me. I love that, et cetera. They just expect me to know, what they want to see. And other requests, things like, can you tell me the projected knowledge worker growth for ASQX through the end of the year? And that was just kind of sent to me, and no further explanation was given. The last one, I need the following CSA and RSA demographics for QX by the following locations: Seattle, LA, and Portland. And so these are real requests that I've received, and something that we've learned on our analytics team is kind of these 3 key lessons. First of all, don't be afraid to ask questions, and particularly in my case, asking a lot of questions. I find that it kind of can be annoying to the person making the request when I come back with quite a few follow-up questions, but it will save an exorbitant amount of work in the long run if we get upfront about framing that question. It's really obnoxious to have gotten halfway through your analysis and start sharing what kind of the insights you're receiving, only to find that what you're doing is not answering the question they actually had in mind. And oftentimes, a lot of these leaders who are providing us these questions haven't really taken the time to sit down and figure out what the question really is. Business leaders are busy, just like all of us, and oftentimes they're just trying to get the question, get the ball rolling on the question before necessarily framing it themselves. And so it's our job as the analyst to sit down and make sure they're clear, and that we're clear on what they're trying to answer here. It's always good to agree on a delivery time frame. Sometimes someone will tell me they need this tomorrow, in which case that helps me understand what type of analysis I'm going to be doing. Am I going to be doing a very brief cursory analysis? Or if this is a significant question, I'm more than happy to step up and chat with them about, hey, I can give you an answer tomorrow that will be just a really quick and cursory answer to your question. Or if you can give me a month, I can do some really deep dive analysis into this. We can model, we can do some statistical testing, we can do some pretty exciting things and come up with a really good, actionable answer, as opposed to just a quick response that likely will not achieve any real value. It's the full, going through this entire analytical framework all the way to telling the story and then creating action is where we really drive value here. And then the final lesson is determine your audience and needs. And this I can't stress enough, that it's really important to know not just who the question is coming from, but what do they need from that? What are the goals of this question? Are they going to be wanting to make changes in their organization? Are they wanting to change how they'll be making decisions? And so these are some of the key questions that we ask up front. Additionally, it's important in the next step in identifying potential data to the lessons that we really learned well here in our organization is to collaborate. And not just within your specific work group, but across the organization. So my 3 lessons learned here: develop a wide analyst network, offer to help other groups on their work, which will in turn allow them to be more willing to help you on yours, and know what data exists in other areas of the organization. I want to share a specific example of here at Alaska, we have what's referred to as our ARC, which is our analysis and reporting community. And what it is it's more or less a social organization that is sponsored by the company, that anyone in any sort of analytical role from anywhere in the company is invited to participate. And we meet together at least once a month. Occasionally it's social gatherings, but oftentimes we have trainings or brainstorming sessions or opportunities to get together and share best practices. And this is purely just a networking opportunity. Very rarely do we actually tackle real business problems, but what we do is we foster relationships, and we develop these contacts that if all of a sudden I have a question that comes to me and I realize I could really use some data from our revenue analysis group, I actually have a few folks on the revenue analysis team who I've known and been able to develop a relationship with through ARC that I can reach out to and ask what data they have. But additionally, and what has been really valuable to me is having developed those relationships, when I know what data they have, they can help me get access to that data, which can oftentimes be kind of a stumbling block. In certain organizations, actually getting access to certain types of data can be very cumbersome. Having these networks, they can at least provide me with the data that I need if it's not possible for me to get full access to the data. But at the very least, we can really leverage that network for all types of data identification and access issues. In addition to the wonderful benefit it is to have other analysts that you can bounce ideas off of and share insights with how to solve certain problems. So that's one that I highly recommend, and is a really neat thing that we do here at Alaska Airlines. Additionally, as you're evaluating and knowing your data, we talked about the great things and lessons learned. It's important to just get into that data and explore around. So this is where I'll start talking a little bit about Alteryx and the benefits that we've used. The tool in Alteryx, as both Lisa and Dave have mentioned, is really catered to the drag and drop, to the you don't have to know coding, but it allows you to jump right into the data, all the way from the data input tool, which is that first one there where under the section, Alteryx easily enables knowing the data. When you're bringing in any data source, as you connect to the database, there is an option to actually grab a quick snapshot of the data. So even if it's a database that has hundreds of millions of rows, which we have a lot of here at Alaska, before I go through the trouble of tying that data in and pulling it, which may take quite a bit of time for it to actually pull the data into my workflow, I can actually just do a quick snapshot of the first few rows of the data so I can quickly evaluate the data being shown and whether it's useful for my situation. Additionally, they have summarize tools and browse tools that I like to insert regularly throughout my workflows, which allow me to periodically see how the data is flowing through my workflow. See how things, if I'm changing things, if I'm prepping my data or I'm cleaning my data, I want to be able to check in and make sure that what I'm doing is actually having the effect that I want. And then the summarize tool really allows, as Dave was mentioning, kind of the statistical summaries, the means, medians, maxes, minimums, as well as dozens of other types of summary tools that you can implement. Then as you actually are preparing the data for use, this I like to refer to as kind of the drudgery of the everyday analyst. You haven't actually gotten into doing your analysis yet. You're still just trying to get the data ready for that. This is that 80% that Dave was talking about, where a lot of analysts, they dread coming into work because of the menial tasks that they have to do to get the data ready. It's really exciting as an analyst to come up with insights and to tell the story and to see action being taken. And so whatever you can do to get through this preparation of the data faster is what will really make you enjoy your job more and will allow you to really drive action and improvement at your company. And so any tools that we have that can assist in this are really invaluable. And Alteryx, in addition to a lot of other beneficial things that they provide, they really specialize in data prep, both streamlining and simplifying it. Again, it's a drag and drop process, icon-based, extremely user-friendly, which is particularly useful for me in the HR group because as I'm starting this analytics function in this division, I'm surrounded by a lot of folks who are very intelligent and very smart at what they do, but they're not data savvy. The HR function traditionally is not quite as analytical as a lot of other groups in the company, and that's common across a lot of other industries as well. And so any tools that I have, I really need them to cater to folks who definitely do not have any coding background and who may be nervous around traditionally analytical tools. And this is one that I can introduce and have been successful at getting people used to navigating around Alteryx, even through things such as streamlining and simplifying data prep. Then we get into the actual analysis, and this is where the analyst really enjoys. I say, it gets the analyst out of bed and into work each day. It can be simple analysis, such as just general statistics, or it can be complex modeling, optimization, in-depth forecasting. This is where we really get into our insights and the excitement around telling a story and solving problems. And so I won't go into a whole lot of detail. Dave talked about this, very well. But I did want to showcase that Alteryx is a great tool for enabling any type of analytics, from those simple all the way to the complex analyses, everywhere from statistics to optimization to modeling, even some pretty complex machine learning can be done within Alteryx itself. And it's something that I don't have time to go into depth here, but something that is fun to just jump into and explore around. The next step here, I'm going to combine the telling the story and the act, because this is where I feel like you're going to make or break your analytics. Even if you have the best analytics, if you don't tell your story well in a way that drives action, then it's incomplete and likely will fail. It can be tempting to rush this step, because you've found your insight, you've found what needs to be done, and you think you just need to share it as quickly as possible to make that change as quickly as possible. But if you rush this step and you don't tell it in a good and convincing way, very often it falls on deaf ears, or it gets ignored, or it just doesn't drive the action you really want. And so this is where I actually spend the majority of my time doing analytics, is on this piece, where after I've determined what needs to be done, I spend a lot of time telling the story, visualizing it in a way that is tailored to my specific audience, and not just preparing the story and preparing the deck and sending it off and hoping that things happen. I've really realized through sad experience that I have to champion my story. I need to, I can't expect that it will tell itself. I need to be able to push it through at times to make sure that it stays top of mind and we can really drive benefits and improvement. So I really quickly want to share a real life example. And I'm going to go pretty briefly through this because I want to make sure we have time for some Q&A here. But I got an original ask here, which was just a quick email saying, hey, we want to set up a new training location for flight attendants in Los Angeles. And we have some data about where folks live, and they presented it in an Excel file that had just, the zip codes for all of our flight attendants. And they asked me, hey, can you help us visualize this so we can make a good decision? So here's the Alteryx workflow. It took me just a couple hours to build this, and it only took me a couple hours because I'd never built a map workflow in Alteryx before. So it took me a little bit longer. A normal question such as this, if I'm used to doing it, I could probably build a workflow like this now in less than a half an hour to solve this type of a question. And I'm not going to go into the detail here, but I do want to reference that this workflow was created. Again, I had no experience building a workflow like this, but within the Alteryx Designer tool, they have sample workflows, and I found one that matched pretty closely with what I was looking to do, and I just modeled this answers with our own data, specifically after what they had done in their sample workflow, and it presented this analysis right here. So here's a little zoom in here on the map. Again, I was given this, and they wanted it back, of course, the next day, so I didn't have time to do anything really fancy, but I just created a map for the LA area, and I color-coded the zip codes with the number of flight attendants that lived in it. And you can see with a little red arrow there, before they came to me and they had the data simply in that Excel spreadsheet, they couldn't really read it very well. They were looking at putting the base up there to the northwest of the Burbank airport, out where there aren't many flight attendants living. And we were able to show through this really quick visual analysis that if you really want to locate this training base in a more central location to where our flight attendants live, which is really what they wanted, what we really need to be looking is further south, southeast, particularly closer to the Long Beach or Orange County airports, right there where you see a lot of the dark blue shaded zip codes. And so this was just a real neat experience. This was something that they were so appreciative of. And I wanted to highlight this particular story because this was an example really of a quick win. And when you're starting analytics, or when you're trying to build your reputation for analytics or your analytical function, what you really need to do is demonstrate the value, particularly as quickly as possible. And so small, quick win projects like this that really drive action and drive decisions are kind of your bread and butter to getting things out there. And then you can move on to the larger projects that will be longer term and drive a lot of value. but you're not going to be trusted with those projects until you can show that you're able to come up with real actionable insights, even on a pretty quick basis here. So that was kind of a whirlwind rush through my specific examples and this particular quick win example as well. I'm going to turn the time back over to Lisa to kind of close us out and prep us for the Q&A period.
Thank you, Levon. So I think the one thing I just want to spend a little time here on, both Dave and Levon talked about this, and for those of you who don't know Alteryx, I just want to take a quick second here about what makes us unique and different from other products out there. So first and foremost, we are the only vendor that understands that integrating all steps of the analytic process is instrumental into a single platform. And we're about creating that analytics pipeline and underpinning it with the solution that you need to be able to move quickly and iteratively from each stage. And when we say each stage, we mean every single stage, from the data cataloging and data research, which Dave was talking about in terms of driving efficiencies and preventing people from duplicating work. Having all of your models, your workbooks, your actual data sources in a single pane of glass with a Google-like search interface is what we do offer. And then what you saw was from Levon in terms of the actual building up of the models. And to his point and to Dave's point, it's code-free and code-friendly. So if you're a citizen user or if you're a specialized data scientist who needs to code in R or Python, the Alteryx Designer is flexible enough for both. You saw the drag and drop from Levon. We have a lot of data scientists that use our platform to drive greater levels of efficiency and to pre-code and create these general repositories for those citizen users who maybe not be as technical and allow them to build upon them. And last but not least, it's about deploying those models and putting them into production. What you heard from Dave and Levon is just one component in terms of the consumption side. Just like building analytics, you need to be agnostic in terms of the data sources that you consume. In terms of getting those insights out and driving real business value, you need to be completely agnostic in terms of sharing those results, whether that's putting it out into a visualization like Levon was showing, whether that's embedding it into your business processes, actually folding your models into your existing systems without requiring IT investment in weeks-long work. We provide a simple API that eliminates that process, or creating static reports and automating those, or writing it back into an Excel file or back into your data warehouse. Those are the things that are critical in creating that analytic agility that organizations need today. So with that, I'll pass it on over to Bill for the Q&A portion.
Well, Lisa, Dave, Levon, thank you so much for that great, excellent presentation. We'll get started with today's Q&A session, and I want to thank the audience for their participation because we've had a lot of questions that have come in. And we'll do our best to get through all of them in the time remaining. And so during this Q&A session, I'll leave up this screen with contact information for Dave, Levon, and Lisa if you'd like to contact them after today's event. Levon, Dave, a bunch of questions have come in regarding how you convince your company to adopt a modern analytic process and then what that process should look like. So Levon, let me start with you. How did you go about selling the idea of a modern analytic process to Alaska, and what were the most challenging parts of changing people's minds to try that new solution?
Sure. So I'll start off with kind of the roadblocks that I had. When I came into this role, the expectation was that we were going to need a data warehouse, and that was just kind of very much communicated. That was the plan. They didn't know how they needed to do that. That was going to be one kind of task to me. But they were expecting we were going to do, an extensive project for a data warehouse and go through that process. As I came in, very early into my role here is when I was introduced to Alteryx, and I realized that I could provide real analytics and a lot of really useful work very quickly using Alteryx without having to wait around for the data warehouse, which frankly was never going to be prioritized very high with our IT group, simply because we have a lot of other competing responsibilities. And so really what happened was I just jumped into Alteryx and started showing value from that, even with small questions. For example, that map that I showed was one of the first things that came my way. and it really is just showing value quickly. I can't overstress the value of quick win projects and of just really championing those stories. It will allow you to increase your own reputation as an analytical champion, and people will trust you more. So I guess that's probably the best general answer that I can give that would be most applicable to kind of all groups and all organizations.
Well, Levon, thanks. Dave, I know you've done this for a bunch of companies. What's your experience?
I think Levon hit some of the key points right on the head. And the first one is show them. Don't go out and try to sell it based on theory. Show actual results, and that very directly connects to quick win projects. The other thing that needs to be done, I think, is to build some consensus. And the way you get to consensus is by getting a lot of collaboration, communication, people working together. So the ARC organization that Levon talked about for creating a community works very effectively. I've worked with another company, a sportswear company, that went through the process of remaking their BICC. Instead of BI Competency Center, it is now BI Competency Community. And it's more than just a name change, it's a cultural change and a staffing change, so that they really have people working together, communicating, sharing, and out of this you get the consensus, you get the understanding, and you shape your own life cycle, which, you know, there are many variations on this. I drew one picture of it, Levon drew another picture of it. You put your own language to it. Then the third component, I think, is a concept I've promoting a lot in my speaking called data coaching. And the idea here is that everybody has some areas in working with data where they have some level of skills others can benefit from. Everybody also has areas in which they can benefit from others. So everybody has opportunity both to coach and to be coached. And if we get people working together, sharing their data skills, asking for advantage from the data skills of others, we elevate the skills of the whole organization. And all of this communication and collaboration just naturally flows into finding the process that works for the organization, and everybody's going to naturally migrate toward the processes that minimize that front-end tedious drudgery stuff and maximize the opportunity for finding insights. So, you know, I think it's a cultural thing. I think it's a human thing, much more than a business case thing.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for that answer. Lisa, maybe you could help.
Chime in on that one as well. So I think one of the key things that both Dave and Levon are saying, and what makes it unique, is the collaboration and that communication. And I just want to pop back to slide 40 from Levon's presentation here quite quickly to showcase something that's unique and what we see in organizations that work really well in terms of bridging that communication, that collaboration. It's about eliminating that black box coding of analytic world where it takes a long time to produce something for your business consumer. That's how you're going to build trust. It's how you're going to build value, and it's how you're going to make them feel part of the process. So as you can see here from Levon's workflow, it doesn't take somebody, you know, who's sitting on the business side to look at this and go, I don't understand what that is. It's a bunch of random code that makes no sense to me, and it doesn't feel relatable. They can walk through this with your analyst. The other thing is, and Dave Wells talked about this earlier about the life cycle, it has to be iterative and fast. The days of going back into your office and coding something in a couple of days or a couple of weeks is not, it's not supporting the modern life cycle, and it doesn't build that trust. It doesn't build that value if a business user has to wait. The drag and drop tools that Levon was showing here make it very easy for somebody to iterate on the fly and adjust those analytic queries or that model to make it much more valuable and build that collaboration.
Well, Lisa, Dave, Levon, thank you so much for those terrific answers to some very good questions. And for those of you that asked questions today that weren't answered, we'll be sending all the unanswered questions to the Alteryx team so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. I have just a few quick announcements. If you'd please mark your calendars for March 21st, that's tomorrow, and our next DSC webinar, which will be Top 4 Excel Functions Done Better with Data Wrangling, and that'll be sponsored by Trifacta. Also, today's taping will be available for on-demand viewing later today, and you can find that on the homepage of Data Science Central in the Webinar tab located at the top of the page. Well, this brings today's webinar to a close. I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions, and a special thanks again to Alteryx for their sponsorship, as well as to our speakers today, Dave Wells, Levon Johnson, and Lisa Aguilar, for their insight into today's topic. Well, this is Bill Voorhees. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event. I look forward to seeing you all again on March 21st, that's tomorrow. Have a great day.